Welcome to the Costa Property Podcast, the podcast that turns your dreams of owning a piece of paradise on the Costa del Sol into reality. I'm Warner Laurie, and I'm joined by my co-host and wife, Sandra Laurie.
Join us as we embark on navigating the ins and outs of real estate and relocation to this beautiful region.
We're not just about market trends, we're about sharing real-life experiences, because we know the struggle firsthand and I've helped many people navigate this challenge also.
If you're dreaming of your perfect Costa del Sol home and want to get real, no-frills, expert advice, then you're absolutely in the right place. Join us each week as we share honest insights and information that will guide your journey. Welcome to a very special episode today of the Costa Property Podcast. Ladies, we're diving into something juicy today. We've got the incredible Tara Collins. Tara is the host of Single Married Geary, joining us for a no-filter, tell it like it is episode all about dating in Spain. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of what it's like to date in Spain as an expat. And trust me, nothing is off limits for this episode. Are Spanish men really the flirty charmers that we've heard about? Or is there more to this story? So sit back, pour yourself a glass of vino, if you like, and get ready for some unfiltered talk all about dating in Spain. Plus, we answer the question, what does a Geary actually mean? And is it actually controversial? Let's dive into today's episode. Tara, how are you today? I am over the moon to have you here with me today as my guest.
I'm absolutely delighted to be. I'm excited to talk to you about one of my favourite subjects in the world.
And this topic has come by really hot demand. I was mentioning to you before we started recording, this has come as multiple requests from our listeners. And I'm just so pleased that you can be here as our expert. She said, I think we need wine for this discussion, but it's a bit early in the morning.
If it was December, we could put a little nip of Bailey's in there, but I try to keep it 1 month of the year, the Christmas coffees, because otherwise things are going to slide.
Yeah. Oh, God. I should have thought about that. But anyway, water and coffee for this morning. That's where we are. But first up, I'm really curious about you, how you ended up in Spain, your Spanish story.
Okay. So I am from the UK originally. I left the UK in 2010 and I moved with my husband to Portugal, right up in the north of Portugal. And that's where we had our 2 children. And then it was beautiful. It's such a gorgeous area, but we wanted a little bit more life, a little bit more, integration, especially when we had the kids. And we had a friend who was living in Cadiz, capital. And she said, would you fancy coming down here? And I said, the thing is about the south of Spain, it's going to be full of other British people. I won't meet any Spanish people. It'll just be people eating English breakfast and getting drunk at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I was super resistant to coming to the south of Spain because I had this impression in my head that it would just be, kiss me quick hats and English breakfast. And I was horrified by the very idea. And I just thought, no, that's not for me. And she said, no, Cadiz is really different. As there's not that many expats here. It's mainly Spanish people. A lot of people from kind of Seville have holiday homes in that kind of area. So it's a very Spanishy area. And so we moved there. And we stayed there for 5 years. We both did stay there for 5 years. We didn't stay married for the full 5 years. So then in 2017, I left my husband whilst we were staying in Cadiz. And then in the end of 2020, I came up to where I am now in Málaga province, a little bit inland.
Amazing. So you're settling in to Malaga area. How are you finding it?
I really think that the provinces next door to each other and they're so different in their feel, right? I mean, there's a lot been put into the Malaga province. There's a lot of investment been put in and the infrastructure is somewhere that Cadiz is years and years away from having. But Cadiz has this kind of magical charm. It's so old, worldly, and it will have a piece of my heart forever, I think. I love the coast, but I also love how kind of easy life is here. And I still have managed to avoid anyone wearing a kiss me quick hat. Although there is more of that on the coast here than there is on the coast in Cadiz. But yeah, it's definitely not the awful tacky place that I thought it was going to be. It's beautiful.
Amazing. And I think the thing is you can avoid the tackiness if you want to.
Of
you know what I mean?
Can.
If you're here for a hen weekend or, that's your vibe or what you're into. Yeah.
And the same thing, when I was working in central London, I wasn't hanging out in Leicester Square. You can be where you find your people, where you find someone that makes you feel comfortable.
Exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. So listen, before we dive into the dating scene, and I know that you have so much advice and tips to share with, I'm curious about the term giri. What's your take on it? I suppose it's a little bit controversial. What do you say?
I think it can be. I think it can be quite derogatory. So if I'm trying to do something in a local office or something like that, and I speak Spanish and they go, oh, can speak Spanish. And I say, yeah, I'm giri, but I'm not like giri, yeah? Like there's kind of levels. So to me, it just means basically a non-brown foreigner. You're a white foreign person. So normally it's normally used for the kind of the Brits, but also the Scandies and everything else. You can lump all of us in there. But yeah, basically you're a foreigner.
Love that. Thank you. I know my son, he gets very offended when he goes to like his Spanish friend's house and like there's a reference to giri. So like some people take it differently. It can be a bit controversial.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of used for people who don't adapt and don't try and fit in and don't kind of assimilate themselves into like the local culture and stuff. It's got that connotation for sure. Is you're not speaking the language, you don't understand what time lunchtime is, you're trying to have dinner at 7. We think kind of giri behaviours like that.
Yes. That's totally true. That's totally true. Listen, there's so many myths out there about Spanish men. What's one myth that you found to be totally true or completely false when it comes to Spanish men?
I mean, I don't know if it's the same. I think when certainly I was younger, there was kind of this big kind of romantic, dark, Lothario kind of thing. And I just don't think that they're that romantic. Maybe it's because like at the time it was people going on package holidays and the waiters would be charming and they got this kind of idea that all these Spanish men are charming and romantic and after all the women and that kind of thing. And maybe they're just not being that romantic to me.
I agree with you. There was almost like this romantic perception, like portrayed like in like rom-coms from the 90s of like the Spanish waiter. And you'd almost be offended then if you went into a restaurant and the waiter wasn't coming up to you. So I totally agree with you.
Do you know what I think we should do? I think we should go to several restaurants and we should see if the waiters come on to us or not. And we'll just give them a little ranking and we'll go all the way along.
But I hear what you're saying in terms of there is a perception that, it's very romantic and, you'll be wined and dined. But what I'm hearing from you in reality, that's just not the case.
Really not the case. It's not what I found. I mean, for a start, most of the Spanish men that I've come across live with their parents, which I don't find romantic in the slightest. Even up to, I understand. When I slept with my first boyfriend, I moved back home for a little bit, who I'd been living with. That was when I was 21. I'm 45 now. The idea of moving back with my parents, but there's a real cultural difference that you kind of live with your parents and then maybe you go to university or you do a little bit of traveling and then you move back with the parents until you get married a lot of the time. And so that to me is that's a big one.
I guess I'm curious, but also from our listeners' perspective. So like if you do date somebody and they're Spanish and they're living with their parents, like are the Spanish mums the same as like, say like Irish mammies where I'm from, where the mom would be almost putting holy water on the girl, like walking through the house, like because you're living in sin, is it like, how is that perceived by the woman of the house, in terms of if there's a dating situation going on?
I see it culturally as a whole, kind of with the mummy's boys, the kind of mummy boys. And so there's kind of there's almost not a pride in that, look, my son's dating, obviously a very attractive woman, but there's a certain level of that. I think you're more likely to get given a glass of gazpacho in the morning for your hangover than get holy water thrown at you. But I do have a story about a friend who went back to a guy's house. They had gone to a music festival in Ceuta, in the Spanish territory. And he was like in his 40s and he had this long curly hair and he looked like he won from Guns N' Roses. And they were having a fabulous time and she went back to his house and she went to get up in the morning and she hadn't realised that he lived with the mum and dad. And so she opens the bedroom door and it opens out into the living room and they're sitting having their cup of coffee in the morning are both parents.
Right, it brings walk of shame to a whole new level.
I know, and to make it even worse, the dad, who was diabetic, had taken off his false leg and kind of popped it to the side. So she just walked into this scene of like the mum with the coffee and the dad with the leg in one hand and she was just completely... She was like, why didn't you say anything? And he's kind of like, where do you think I would live? And it's like, well, anyway, they were very nice.
That's so interesting. From an Irish, where I'm from Ireland, or UK perspective, where you're from, Spanish dating culture can be quite different. What are some things about Spanish men or dating customs, I guess, that really surprised you that could be interesting for our listeners to know?
I think it's more common in the UK. Most of what we do is kind of based around drinking. And I think it's much more normal here to go and meet someone for a coffee, or to go for I went for like a walk on the beach when I used to live next to the beach, as kind of a get to know you activity, rather than let's go out and get absolutely wasted for a first date, which I think is quite nice because it's, you know, I mean, things change. The trajectory of my dating has definitely been interesting. And there's certain things now that I've put in place after all my kind of experiences and fun. There's certain things that I've put in place that I'm not willing to do or accept for first dates. And I think that's actually very easy here because if I say I don't want to spend, you know, I want to spend hours with someone on a first date. I want to meet you for a coffee, or I'll go for a walk for an hour, and I'll give you an hour of my time for a first date. And that is, you know, that's enough. And it's never been a problem with a Spanish man.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know you mentioned from a UK perspective, but that would be the same from an Irish cultural perspective as well. It's normal to meet in a pub or in a bar or in a restaurant, and it becomes like a long event rather than... That's quite energetically draining as well. You know, you almost feel like you have to psych yourself up for that.
And especially I'm a single parent. My children go to their dad 4 nights a month. So of those 4 nights, I don't want to give only 25% of my child-free time to someone I've never met. So, I'm particularly careful about my time because it's limited. Yeah, my kids are old enough now that they go and they see other friends. So I do have more than 4 nights a month. That's extreme. But I might not if they don't have anything else on. So the idea of giving away all of that time to someone and not having like the best time.
Absolutely. And I would imagine then in terms of when you do meet for a coffee or you have a walk, a get to know you activity, you know, if it's not working after an hour and you just feel like you're not getting a vibe from the person.
It's very freeing. Once I figured out you could do that, delighted with myself.
That feels a lot more, I guess, achievable, you know, for somebody if they were moving over and they were like dipping their toe in the dating scene here.
It's much less daunting. Much less daunting because it gets, I mean, a lot of the people that I speak to are people like myself where we got married maybe in our 20s and we were separated in our 40s and the landscape is so wildly different. Like the dating landscape, we used to meet someone in the pub through friends, have a snog. If you like them, you'd see them again. And then when I left my husband, there's all, you know, then you suddenly get thrown into the world of these apps and you're swiping on people's faces and it feels brutal. And then to go from that forced getting to know someone kind of thing, it's not a natural, he's a friend of a friend, I've met them in the pub. You don't know really how it's going to go until you meet someone in person. And so to know that you can just do that for an hour, I think it takes a lot of pressure off people, especially if you're kind of new to dating or, you know, you've been in a long-term relationship and now you're kind of trying to date again. It can be really daunting for people.
And I love what you've said there in terms of that's almost customary here. You know, it's not expected that you do it any other way. So it's freeing, but also it's not odd behavior.
No, exactly. You're not like a weirdo. I mean, if you are, it's not for that reason. You could be a weirdo anyway.
Exactly. But that's good. And, you know, I observe it. And, you know, when I do have single friends and that, you know, that are dating and describing it, you're absolutely right. That's what they're doing. They're going for a coffee. They're spending a little bit of time together, seeing how they get on. And, you know, that's completely acceptable. So that's amazing. I love that. Tell us a little bit about the most memorable dating experience that you've had in Spain. Any tales or experiences? Now, don't hide the juicy stuff. We're absolutely here for the juicy stuff too.
Well, when I first started dating, when I first kind of downloaded Tinder and then I deleted it again because like it's brutal. Like it just felt so impersonal. And I was like, okay, then I downloaded it and psyched myself up, started swiping. And where I used to live in Cadiz, there's a US naval base down the road. So it was super easy for me because I didn't have the language barrier. Although I speak Spanish, like flirting in Spanish and speaking in Spanish, they're two different things. And also like the kind of little cultural references or in-jokes. So I was kind of fishing in the barrel of American sailors, basically. I decided that I got married, when I was 25, I think. And I knew that I didn't want to find a relationship straight away, but I did want to date. In my mind, I was like, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set my age parameters low because I know that no one who's like in their 20s is going to be able to hook me because they won't have enough life experience and they won't have they just won't have the mental thing there. And, you know, that's really very attractive to me. So I thought I'll go young. And then all of these pretty 26-year-old sailors are coming up in my Tinder. And I'm like, oh my God, can I? I don't know. I did. And that's another thing to go over, another mindset problem.
I was hoping you would say that.
So my first date, I got a bus over to his town, over to Chipiana. And he said, I'll get you from the bus station. I said, oh, are you sure I'll recognize you? And he's like, oh, yeah. I turn up and there is the most American looking thing I've ever seen. There was this enormous red Jeep that he'd had shipped over from the States, because if you're here for a long enough time, they'll ship your car. It was, he wouldn't have got into Mercadona, I'm telling you that much, in that Jeep. It was enormous. And I was wearing a little dress and I had to kind of clamber in. And this guy is 6'7". He's like over 2 meters tall. It's the most American thing. Big tall Norm, I called him. Anyway, so we had our first date. We went for a couple of gin tonics. So we went back to his. And I was like, oh, I've nailed it. I've nailed dating. I don't know what all the fuss is about. I'm going out on a date. Like, this guy was sculpted from marble. He looked like an Adonis. No one. I've never met anyone in the UK that looked like that. So next day I tripped home. I was delighted with myself. I went to and then we went to some concert or something. We went to see Fatboy Slim. I was like, look at my life. I've nailed everything. And then, of course, he was like, I don't want to see you again.
So obviously that was the introduction then into like the dating scene. And then what was the trajectory after that? So like, you set the standard really high with big, tall Norm. Like, how did you recover from sculpted by gods to reality?
I mean, well, I just played around with other sculptures for a while, because say what you will about the US Navy, but they keep those boys in shape. And I did who came after him? Flamingo shirt teacher guy. He was a Spanish guy, a teacher, and he turned up to his date in a flamingo shirt. And he was really fun. He's really cute. I'm still in touch with him now. He's in a band, not a famous one, but we're still friends now. Anyway, I had a coffee with him and I liked him. And so I said, oh, do you want to come over later for a glass of wine the same day? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I invited him over because the next day I was flying to London at 6 a.m. So I gave him a couple of glasses of wine, enough that he wouldn't be able to drive home that evening. And then I got a lift to the airport. The next day he was like,
resourceful.
I know. He's like, did you just use me to get a lift to the airport? I was like, yeah, I did. Yeah. I can't lie. I was drunk on my own power for many, many months. I couldn't believe dating could be, I couldn't believe I could date these people. My perception of like how attractive I was so kind of tied up with 20 years previously. And then all of a sudden you hit this ground with the kind of maturity and the confidence of a woman of our age, or my age. I don't want to group you in if that's inappropriate. And it's like, okay, like this, do you want to do this? You'll see. And if not, next. And there's once that kind of attachment is gone, and yes, I wasn't looking for a relationship, so perhaps it was different. But even looking, now I'm more open to having a relationship. I still wouldn't make any kind of stronger attachments. Like, I wouldn't be pulling a big tall Norm again. I can fix him. I've done it. Like, after one date, excuse me, you don't even know the person after one date. So it's fun because you get to choose, and what's on offer is there's just so much. There's like, do I like this person, that person? This person knows how to parasail, and that one knows how he does bird watching. Like, people who know how to do something, to me, is so interesting. Like, if you've got a mastery of something, even if it's not something that I'm interested in, and you get to, through people give the apps a bad name, but I've met so many, such a diverse range of people that I never would have bumped into. I mean, maybe I will in Mercadona now with the old Hora de Ligar. Who knows? But it's really eye-opening how many different people you can kind of chat to.
I love your honesty about that, and I love your perspective of that in terms of, it is daunting, but you're bringing a whole different range of life experience to the situation, a whole different sense of tools that you have now that you wouldn't have had an earlier version of you. And if you look at that positively, that's only going to enhance your experience. So that's a really fresh take of it. I also really appreciate your perspective there on the apps, because all I ever hear about apps is negative rap, but as you correctly articulated there, dating now versus dating then, you never would have been exposed to the variety or diversity of people without those apps, because you would have been with your friendship groups, introduced to Tom, who knows Claire, who, and that's like a narrow-minded thinking. So you're never going to meet those people with those hobbies. So that's such a great take on it.
What I always say to people is, if you go into a big pub, you're not going to like everyone in there. And you're not going to find everyone in there attractive, and the ones that you find attractive might not find you attractive. And it's the same with the apps. It's kind of like a microcosm of that whole scene. Like, even if you're walking down the street, the people that you see, you're not going to have the same values as. You're not going to find them all attractive or interesting or funny. And it's exactly the same thing. I just think we just have to see it for what it is.
Amazing. Let's say I'm a lady and I'm following my life dream to move to Spain, and I'm, planning my journey and, I'm single and I want to date when I get there. How do I start? What do I do? What's my first step to begin?
It might be an unpopular opinion. I think before you start dating or before you start finding people to date, the best thing I think to do is get clear on why you're dating. Are you hoping to find your future husband, or are you just wanting to go on a few dates, or are you just wanting to have some company because you're new somewhere, or, and are you running away from a relationship? Where are you in your own personal journey? And then once you've got that sorted, then you kind of decide, like, am I just going to have a bit of fun? Am I going to download the apps, or am I going to go? There's quite a few speed dating things set up in Malaga City. I'm sure there's probably more along the coast where you are, but that kind of thing, there are singles groups that are set up. There's some people who have walking groups, for example. You can go to Mercadona at 7:00 and bump your trolley into someone with a pineapple in it. That's all the rage nowadays. But depending on I think it's like when you're moving to Spain, right? You have to figure out what you want and what's important to you before you start buying houses, because you could end up in an area that doesn't suit you. And I think it's the same thing with dating. If you just want to go out and have a bit of fun with Juan from the local bar, then go for it. But if you're looking for something, a bit more deep, and like figure out what your red flags and green flags are, figure out what you really want to get out of it before you start, and then you'll have a much smoother kind of run of it.
I would imagine if you don't do that and you don't take the time to really question your why, you'll set yourself up for disappointment because you're not matching your expectations to really what you want. So you could actually get burned. Yeah. That would just be like something that's come to mind.
Yeah, exactly. I have seen people who they go out with someone and then that person's like really not interested in a relationship, not because of the person, just because they don't want that themselves. And it's really key to not take that kind of thing personally. I had a friend who was in tears because after she mentioned that she had kids, this guy stopped chatting to her and they've been chatting for a couple of days. And I was like, well, he should have said, actually, that's a hard pass for me. But also perhaps he should have been more honest in the first place, or it's actually nothing to do with you as a person. That's just what they're looking for. And yes, it can be upsetting, but it isn't personal. And you have to let go of that kind of taking things personally thing if you're going to survive the landscape of dating, because it's so often not personal. I've stopped talking to people because I've suddenly had work come up or something else, and you're not important enough to me at that stage of dating for me to put other stuff in my life on hold. Doesn't mean that I don't like you as a person or I haven't enjoyed chatting to you. It's simply that you're not that high up on my priorities currently. You might get there if we carry on dating, or you might not, but at that point, it's not personal.
You're so right. And that's a great perspective, because as humans, we put meaning around things. This is no different, right? As a situation, just like what you described there, just because that person doesn't want to get involved with somebody with kids, we then go and do our human thing, apply our human mind to it, put meaning around it, and it almost becomes something personal about us. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm just thinking, I suppose, out loud in terms of then that becomes, oh God, my confidence is knocked in an environment that's already new to me. Yeah. So it's linking back to your advice there around that piece around the why. I think that's really, really valuable.
I think it really is, because it's horrible to feel knocked like that. And then that's why it's good to have other single friends, someone to hold your hand, because there's no offense to the married folk, but you've got no idea what it's like out there.
And I don't claim to, in terms of, I'm like, I wouldn't even know where to start, so I really admire people's confidence when they're prepared to be brave and like go at it and dip their toe in it, because I met my husband even before Tinder came out. I wouldn't even know what to do. Yeah. It just, like, where do you go? How do you navigate it?
Oh, it's completely different. It's wild. It's wild. And you can either be horrified by it, and that's fine. You can just choose not to enter into it. That's a valid choice. Or you just accept it for what it is and jump in with the rest of us.
Embrace it. I love your take on it. It's just refreshing. So say I'm a single woman and I'm moving to Spain. Where do I meet people? Coffee shops, Tinder. How do I navigate this? Any other things that I need to consider in terms of, do I arrive early? Do I arrive late? If I need to create my own plan, roadmap for dating, like where do I go? What do I do?
I personally prefer to arrive a little bit early, just so I can look at the person arriving. And that's purely a personal thing. Like, no, you probably won't find many people wanting to arrive early, but I like to be situated and watch people come in. And it could be because my eyesight is bad. I've always had trouble finding people at places. So it could be that. I like to be having someone come to me, not trying to look for someone that makes me feel uncomfortable. So that's me. I feel more comfortable if I'm already situated. I'm not like, is that them? Is that them? Is that them? Like, they let them come to me. So that's my be early or late thing. I think when you are, depending where you are, like there's along the coast, there's so many places you can get involved in. Inland is normally a little bit trickier, but it depends what your interests are. Like if you're interested in horse riding, there's a huge social scene around that. There's like different art clubs. There's just that things are smaller and you might not find them by kind of Googling it before you get here. It really is a case of once you get here, it's not as findable online as things are, I don't think, in the UK and Ireland, because the Spanish internet setup is not quite what it is. But you might see kind of posters in local bars saying, there's an art club on this day, or there's like a intercambio of languages. That's a great one to go to because you've got people wanting English, people wanting Spanish, and you're all in it together, muddling along, and it's that shared. Anything that's a shared experience, I think, is always going to create a bond and create a closeness.
That's great advice. I do agree with you on that. We are definitely not in a place where internet is as progressive. And sometimes you have to do your research a little bit more.
You really do. Have you ever tried finding out with any confidence if a restaurant is open or not?
Oh, that is one of my pet hates. I just don't understand it. Why can't people update their Google profiles or their Facebook profiles with their bloody opening times? I've had it so many times where I go to a restaurant and it's shut.
If you're open, let me in.
Oh, it's so typical. But there is something, look, it's not very charming at the time when you get to a restaurant and you've planned your evening around and the restaurant's shut, but it does reflect Spain a little bit.
It does.
And some of the reasons why we do love it in terms of it is relaxed, it is different, it is a vibe, take it as it is. So don't get so stressed about things. But in general, when it comes to like dating in Spain, is there any customs? So let's talk about the old taboo, I suppose, who pays the bill?
Globally, it's tricky. I found that when you go for kind of a coffee or a kind of a small thing first, the man always takes care of that. And I think that if you're not going out on the first date for a big dinner, then it becomes less of a worry as well. It's another reason, I think, to put in these little short first dates because, if the guy's not willing to spring, what is coffee in Spain, $2.20? Say you have a coffee and an orange juice.
Red flag.
Yeah, it might be a £5. If you're not willing to spend a £5 on me, like, my makeup cost more than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then if you go out, I would expect him to buy the first drink and then I'm going to offer to... I went out recently and we had dinner and then I offered to buy ice cream later on in the evening, for example. So, I mean, to me, if you can't buy me a coffee, then... And I think as women, we spend so much on the preparation. Oh, by the time you've got your waxing and your hair and your makeup and your clothes and all of the rest of the thing. And some man's out there pulling on an old pair of boxers and putting a comb through his hair. I'm sorry. Buy me a coffee.
Coffee and an orange juice.
And an orange juice.
€5 on this situation. But let's say, you are a strong, independent woman as you are, and, you're had a lovely evening with a guy and you decide that you want to pick up there. It's just what you want to do. How is that perceived culturally from Spanish male perspective? Like, is it perceived well or negatively?
I think if you try and do it every time, it's going to come across as a little bit controlling. And I think if you're trying to do it every time, you need to look at why. Because I used to do that with young Americans, and it was 100% so that I was in control of the situation. I wasn't open and allowing a man to be in that role of providing or relationship or everything else. I was completely in control. I'm paying for the drinks. I'm saying where we're having the drinks. I'm saying what's happening next. And it was a form of control that I used with these younger men. And of course they didn't mind. But I think if you're trying to do it all the time, I would invite you to just check in on your motives. I think most men are delighted if you offer to buy them dinner every now and then because it's, everyone likes to be treated. I bought a man some flowers once and he didn't know whether to be delighted or horrified. But, I like that. So are they for me? I was like, yeah, they're for you. Another time I sent flowers to a man. I met this guy and I thought, oh my God, I finally found a connection. I was smitten, broke all my own rules, completely smitten. He met him once. He came over to my house, not even a coffee date, straight into the house, obviously. And then he went quiet and I was like, I'll send him some flowers to his office because I Googled his office from his LinkedIn profile. So I send the flowers to his office. He told me he was separated from his wife. Apparently the wife also works in the office and she lost her absolute shit. And the wife is Brazilian. So she's like fiery. She's a fiery lady. And so he's messaging me going, you sent me flowers? I was like, I didn't put my name on them. And he was like, we talked about white tulips in our date and now white tulips turn up in my office. I need you to phone the florist and tell them that it's for Mrs. Insert the name here and not for me. And I was like, you absolute scoundrel. I was like, sure, I'll do that for you. And he's like, cool. And then I'll phone the florist on loudspeaker and my wife will know that the flowers are for her, right? So, of course, I did not phone the florist. And then I'm on loudspeaker and they go, no, they're for Mr. Name. And then he phones back and he's like, they haven't done it. He did it 3 times. And every time I was going, oh, I can't believe they're not updating the story. So yeah, be careful when you're sending flowers, ladies, or believing men that when they say they're separated.
He deserved that bite in the backside.
I should have got those flowers back, if you ask me. I love tulips.
You should have. You absolutely should have. And I'm actually visualizing the reaction of his Brazilian wife in the office. I'm sure there was a few things broken and thrown at his head and across the room. I'd like to have been a fly on the wall for that
would be good.
That
would be good. Yeah.
So I know you mentioned when we started talking that you had created a download for our listeners. So talk to me a little bit about what you've prepared.
So it is a very simple kind of invitation to look into. We've got green flags, red flags, and nowadays we have beige flags. I don't know if because you're not in the dating scene, I don't know if you know about the beige flags.
No, but you need to tell me now. I want to know.
So beige flags, it might be something that just kind of niggles a little bit. Like it's not a bad thing, but it could just be a mismatch in personality, or, you know, like they always want to eat at the same restaurant, for example, would be really annoying to me, but some people find safety in that. Fine. To me, that's a beige flag. Like, I can't be going to the same restaurant every Sunday for the rest of my life. Like, I was dating someone once, actually dating like a series of dates. And he asked me, do I want to have lunch on Sunday? And I said, yeah, sure. Where will we go? And he's like, well, it's Sunday. We're going to have Sunday lunch. And I was like, oh, okay, Mr. Old Man. Like, I want to go and have a roast dinner. It's 34 degrees. I want to go and sit with my toes in the sand and eat fried fish and drink delicious white wine. So to me, that's kind of like a beige flag. So I just created why these flags are important, like why I've given like some examples of real red flags and green flags, and also some examples of beige flags. And I just really invite people, if you're going to start dating, to kind of create your own lists. Like, I find writing things down, I love pens and paper and stationery. I love that kind of thing. But if it's not for you, just think about it and just keep it in the back of your mind. Like, what are my real kind of red flags? I mean, there's the obvious ones like substance abuse and argumentative and that kind of thing. For some people, it's someone who's got children. That's a hard pass. It's someone that's never been married by the time they're 40. I'm a bit like, beige flag, what's wrong with you? Or not married, but never had like a significant relationship. So it's just all of these things in your mind, like what things matter to me, what things are interesting to me. And when I work with people, I've got a much more in-depth kind of way of going through things, a little workbook, and we talk about it all. But for now, I've made a download of like green flags, red flags, beige flags, what they matter, why they matter, and what your own would be. So you can find that at thetaracollins.com/swipe smart if you want to find.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much. So much value there in terms of, I never knew what a beige flag was, but I love that perspective that, again, that's our perception. So what you said there around like that person obviously gets safety going to that same restaurant every Sunday, but like for you or I'd be like, oh, that's boring. But I get it. I do get it in terms of that safety, that predictability, routine that person likes. But yeah, for somebody else, it's an absolute no-no.
My friend is dating someone and he goes with his friends. They go for breakfast every Sunday, which is lovely. Always the same place and always at 8:30 in the morning, which is lovely.
I think that would be a red flag for me, Sunday morning.
But it means, they never get to lie in together on a Sunday morning. So Saturday night is always kind of curtailed because he's always getting up early on the Sunday to go and meet his friends. Now, if that's the only thing that's wrong in the relationship, it's kind of dealable with. It's not a huge thing on its own. But for me, it would annoy me. It would niggle at me,
Yeah, absolutely. It takes spontaneity out of Sunday morning. Yeah. If you want to go for a little romantic walk together, or you're not able to do that because that plan is fixed in place. It's been so insightful to talk to you, and you're great crack. You know what I mean? You're great fun. I love your energy and your take on things. You have an amazing podcast called Single Married Geary, which is hilarious. So how are you getting on with this project? Are you enjoying it?
It's one of my absolute favourite things. I keep leaving all my other work till like the last minute because I'm so involved in working on our own podcast. We've had such lovely feedback. Everyone has said it just feels like listening into a personal conversation, and it's just lovely when people say that they've enjoyed something that you've done. You know yourself with your own podcast, when people say, I died laughing over that thing, or I'd never thought of that. Or some people pop in and they're like, oh, you said that you didn't know what the difference was between this and this. And I know. And people are really involved in and engaged in that conversation. And I think it's a lovely way to maybe I'll meet my future husband through it.
You never know. Manifest it.
Listen, maybe he's listening now. Maybe he's listening to your podcast right now. If you are, come and find me on Instagram.
Mr. Perfect, if you're there.
If you're listening,
Tara wants to hear from you. Get in touch.
You're going to have to buy me an artichoke and a glass of wine.
And if you want to know the significance of why this is funny, you need to go to the podcast.
To go to my podcast.
You need to tune into Single Marital Geary podcast and hear all about artichokes, which I promise you will laugh a lot. But Tara, tell our listeners how they get in touch with you if they want to reach out.
So you can find me on my site, which is thetaracollins.com. It's also my Instagram handle, thetaracollins. Don't forget the, because I am the Tara Collins. You can also find us on the podcast Instagram, which is Single Married Geary. Any of those things, reach out to me there. And on the website, you can see how I work with people. On the podcast, you can listen into how we deal with people.
Amazing. That is fantastic. I will pop all of that information into the show notes. So if anybody does want to get in touch with Tara, all the information will be there for you. And do tune in to their podcast. I promise you will bellyache from laughing. Tara, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening into today's episode on the Costa Property Podcast. Another fantastic episode learning about the highs and lows of relocating to the Costa del Sol from real people who have been through the journey themselves and, of course, our wonderful experts. If you have been enjoying the show so far, remember to hit subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review.
We absolutely love hearing your thoughts. Please send any questions that you would like us to answer on the show to warner@wlcostaproperties.net. Or you can pop us a message on our socials, which are in the show notes. Remember, you can also visit the website, www.wlcostaproperties.net.
See you on the next episode, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.